Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about INTP and ENTJ relationships. This subject is going to be pretty controversial for a lot of you because these two types are shadow. They're complete opposites. Every function that the INTP has, the ENTJ does not. It doesn't mean that they don't use, obviously, shadow functions exist, but it's just so minimal that they don't really understand each other to the fullest extent they could. I think the biggest problem, though, in this particular relationship is the clash between TE and TI. When TI and TE are dominant functions, and they're opposing, so for ENTJs and ESTJs, being extroverted thinking being the dominant function, and ISTPs and INTPs, the introverted thinking being the dominant function, these two types clash with each other because thinking is a judgment function. And so that judgment function, they judge things totally differently, and that makes it difficult for a lot of people. When these relationships get together, what you're going to get is the combination of an argument of what is logical and what is not. So it's a logical clash. This is not so much in the sensory functions, such as intuition and sensing. If they were dominant opposites, they still can relate. It's just going to be a little bit different with the judgment functions, like extroverted feeling versus introverted feeling. They probably annoy each other. Much like an INTP and ENTJ, they would be controversial to a lot of their discussions. I think the conversation, if both can be rational and mature, can actually stimulate both thinking in different ways. I have learned to appreciate INTPs, although at times an immature INTP can annoy me. Introverted thinking can annoy me quite frequently from my experience because I'm all about moving forward. Not that introverted thinkers don't, but I want to get to a conclusion, and I use that conclusion off a basis of fact that is widely known. Yes, the fact could be wrong, but I would assume it's widely known, or it's an assumption. This is worse for ENTJs than it is for ESTJs. So the ENTJ INTP combination is much worse for the ENTJ than it is for the ESTJ if they were to be put in the same place. The reason being is because the NI, the introverted intuition that backs the extroverted thinking, is about long-range future vision, goals, get to the conclusion, and move forward. And so we assume a lot of truths that we may not have objective data, but we've driven a possibility from. For example, it would be very likely in my character to say that I've watched 5 people jump off a bridge. And they did it all because of, they broke up with their girlfriend. So I would be naturally too inclined to say that if another person breaks up with his girlfriend in this particular group, and he is in the same circumstance, then he'd probably jump off the bridge too. And more than likely, so I'm going to say that people who break up with their girlfriends jump off the bridge. Now, obviously, that's kind of flawed. It's not a reasonable conclusion, but it's a very highlighted example of how I would form a conclusion based off of that. The INTP analyzes the conclusion by breaking it down into facts that are subjective. So those facts have to be based on the INTP's personal interpretation of what is true. So the argument between the INTP and the ENTJ is on a basis principle of truth. It's not on a principle of logic per se. It's what is truth. An ENTJ will use objective analysis to form a conclusion that they believe is true. An INTP will form a conclusion based off what the INTP has personally believed is truth, and their truth could be different between different people. So an INTP is likely to say that this is my truth, but their truth is quite different, or truth is different for everyone, or what is truth? And INTPs will question the very principles of truth, while an ENTJ will go, you know what, that's truth, let's move forward. Let's get this taken care of. 100 people all died of smallpox, probably the 101st person is going to die too. The INTP says, well, that's not necessarily true. Here's why. Because when I had smallpox, or when my friend had smallpox, or I read a book once that said that only 60% of people have smallpox and then the 60% of people who had smallpox, 10% died, or whatever it may be. They break it down into reasonable conclusions, and the facts have to be justified within that, or the conclusion may not be true. That was kind of complicated, so I'm just going to explain it another way. Imagine that you're talking about a grand point of why, if you go above the clouds, the sky, you can see the sky for miles and miles and miles. right? And the clarity of the sky being blue, this is what we think, right? We would universally accept that the sky is blue. However, an INTP will tell you that the sky is probably clear and the blue is a reflection from the gases off the ocean water, or some crazy thing like that. And they would say, therefore, you can't conclude that the blue sky helps pilots see because it's off the gases in the water. So in a sense, INTPs get a little more data. They're detail-oriented. It's subjective truth. ENTJs will use truth that's tested by other people off of mass observation. So it creates a complication there. Ultimately, this relationship can be toxic if these two people are not mature. With time, I've learned to appreciate INTPs. They help me question things otherwise I wouldn't question. The extroverted thinking, introverted thinking combination creates a combination that could be utilized in a really way, covering the realm of what could be logic. But it mainly creates conflict and discussion of observational truth versus subjective truth, or external truth, or objective versus subjective. I've had a lot of personal experiences, and I give them examples. I give INTPs examples of 100 different things to prove a point, and an INTP will still just go like, okay, why does that matter? And so it's difficult. It's difficult for an ENTJ to really relate to an INTP, and that's just from the extroverted thinking standpoint. You got the the secondary function right underneath it, the extroverted intuition of the INTP versus the introverted intuition of the ENTJ, and that creates problems too, not so much as the judgment, because they judge totally opposite, so they're going to judge very strange. But the introverted intuition versus extroverted intuition also allows them to see possibilities differently. The INTP does not function in the way that society is established as well as the ENTJ does. People will look at an ENTJ and go, wow, that guy's got his stuff together. People look at an INTP and go, that guy's brilliant, but he doesn't fit in anywhere. He's a misfit. He doesn't make any sense. That guy's crazy, or he's an abstract thinker. He's out there, or he's wild. He doesn't care about his haircut. He doesn't care about his clothes. Why does he smell bad? Not that all INTPs smell bad, but they're going to be thinking things like that. INTPs generally don't care because their objective sensory perception based off their possibilities are outside of themselves. And that has to do with their introverted sensing too. So the combination of that makes INTPs a lot less likely to appear, like an ENTJ would. On the other hand, you've got that ENTJs who can be overly obsessive about how they appear. And that's because the outward projection now becomes inward for the introverted intuition. What is this person thinking? Why are they thinking this? And not that extroverted intuition doesn't do that either. It's just intuition in general is possibilities. It's just understanding how these different functions work in the world. And that extroverted intuition puts INTPs in this extremely creative mind mapping mode. I call them they're like analytical masterminds. They're just brilliant. INTPs, oof. I honestly just give them a lot of props. They can break down an idea and break down an idea and break it down, and it leads to nowhere. Like 95% of the time, and I don't get it. Like, why are they pursuing nothing and no conclusion or no reasonable goal? But that's how they work, and somehow they feel justified in doing it. And if you try to tell them, hey, you're wasting your time, that's when they get upset. INTPs will question everything we're doing, such as, I have a personal vision to, change a certain industry, or to change something, or to build this business, or to do this. And INTP go, why? What's the point? What is the point? Why would you do something like that? On the other hand, an INTP will also say, you're wasting a lot of time. You're wasting time, you're trying to change something that's inevitable, it's pointless. And INTP will tell you all that work is all for nothing because you're working inside of a system that needs to be deconstructed. The whole system's flawed, you need to move on and create a brand new system outside of that system. And it's out there, but it does make sense. A lot of times INTPs, or any NTPs, EN or INTPs, both, I don't know what they're talking about half the time. It's like, what are you saying? It's just very subjective from that dominant introverted thinking. And the introverted sensing, that's a whole other topic. And the extroverted feeling, that's a whole other topic in itself too. So ultimately, it is not I would say it's not a reasonable dynamic unless both parties are very mature. But like I say in all the other compatibility videos, it really just depends on all the variables. It's not just your temperament. It could be your character, your personality. Yes, the types can get along. More than likely not. An ENTJ is impatient. INTP is very, very patient when it comes to solving something. INTPs like to try everything. An ENTJ will go, that didn't work by 150 people who tried it. We're not going to do it because it didn't work by the other 1,000 people. INTP's like, well, those people might have sucked. So we're going to try it because I'm better than those other people. Yes, INTPs can be cocky just like ENTJs in their own way. An INTP may be like, well, that idiot probably missed something. ENTJ may agree with that. Yeah, he was probably an idiot. But still, ENTJs want to use the most reasonable conclusion. We'll look at a list of possibilities and we'll go, that one had the highest success rate. We're going to go with that one because 1,000 people tried it, so we're going to go with the one with the highest success rate. INTPs will go, well, those people were probably all idiots, so we're going to go one by one by one, and I'll find personal experience of what is logical, what works, and the details around that, and then I'm going to form the conclusion based off what I personally experienced. Anyway, ultimately, relationship is very hard, but it can work, and it can actually be extremely insightful for both parties should they be mature enough to tolerate each other and move past their differences. Thank you so much.